I'm Hannah Wilson. I'm the co-founder and director of Diverse Educators. And this is the first in a 3-part series with our partners, our collaborative partners around DEI metrics. An ongoing question from the individuals and schools and trusts we work with is like, how do we measure DEI? And you're going to be hearing from our first partner today about how Edurio do it. But a little bit more about us. So our vision is that everyone is celebrated in every classroom and every school, thinking about diversity, representation, inclusion and belonging across the sector for all of the children in our schools, but also for all the adults in the workforce as well. And we do that by connecting and collaborating and building a community. And I know a lot of you have come to a lot of our events now. For me, it's about the power and the strength of numbers and sharing best practice and making all of our lives and jobs a little bit easier by sharing the things that are working. But also we're really consciously, intentionally amplifying the stories of diverse people and making sure we're listening to the experiences of the people who have identities we don't perhaps hold. The values that underpin our work: acceptance over tolerance, thinking about visibility, thinking about who we're celebrating, thinking about who has a level of belonging, and thinking about the learning journeys we are all on in this space. And here's our mantra: be where you're celebrated and not tolerated. Lots of you have seen this before. So those of you who are in the UK, the 9 colours on the floor represent the 9 protected characteristics protected in law by the Equality Act of 2010. I know some of you are in different countries and it might be a different legislation you're working within, but that is the UK law for here. So the first in the 3 today is with Edurio. I'm going to hand over to Iona Jackson, who's someone we work with quite closely, who's got a very in-depth presentation to share with you all about all the work that she and her colleagues have been doing. So Iona, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, and hi everybody. I think this might be the most geographically dispersed event I've ever presented at, so yeah, pretty excited to be speaking to both Bahrain and Canada at the same time. So I'll share my screen. Hannah, if you can just verbally confirm once you can see.
Yeah, all good. Just put it on a slideshow and we're sorted.
Slideshow. Okie dokie. So yeah, as Hannah says, I'm going to talk to you about basically how to bring data into your equality, diversity and inclusion program. So and how to make sure that you're gathering feedback and you're using data in a way that allows you to kind of move forward in an evidence-informed way and make sure that the action that you're taking is the right kind of action in the right kind of places. So a little bit about Edurio. So we are a school stakeholder feedback provider. So we have a range of surveys across different school and trust stakeholder groups. So staff, pupils and parents, looking at kind of wider experiential things for people within a school or trust organisation. And then we have a couple of deep dive surveys. So there's a safeguarding one for pupils where we look in depth at kind of the experience of kind of safeguarding for within schools for pupils. And what we're here to talk about today is our equality. Oh, could I just ask if anyone's not on mute, if you could just stick on mute, that would be great, thank you. And yeah, I'm here to talk today about equality, diversity and inclusion, which I think everybody in the room is very invested in and cares very deeply about. So hopefully you'll leave today with some useful ideas about how to put data at the heart of your kind of at the heart of your strategy. So a little bit about our equality, diversity and inclusion survey first. Hannah just mentioned the 9 protected characteristics, and these are listed on the side, on the right hand side here. And our survey seeks to understand the experience of working within your school or within your trust, and how that compares among different people from different backgrounds. So whether or not the people who are disabled have the same experience or a different experience as people who do not have a disability, and where are the areas where the experience differs most greatly, and where are kind of the opportunities within that. For you to kind of make things a little bit more equal, equitable, diverse and inclusive, and we do that by asking questions kind of across the staff experience, so from recruitment, then looking at on-the-job experience, so a bit of detail which I'll share in a moment about how equality, diversity and inclusion plays out among staff in their day-to-day, and then also looking at advancement, so how kind of career progression within the trust looks for people from different backgrounds. And then, yeah, a little bit more detail on that. So when we look at equality, we're looking at kind of the suitability and fairness of the workplace. So not only are people treated equally, but actually are they being given the provisions that they need in order to be kind of set up for success within your organisation. Looking at diversity, how kind of your staff perceive your organisation. Does it look diverse? Do they see people that they recognise within their kind of organisation? And then how valued, how included, and how kind of comfortable people are feeling. And as I mentioned, then some stuff on recruitment and advancement as well. And then just a few examples of the questions. I'm not going to read all of them to you, and these aren't kind of all of the questions covered in our survey, but as an example, within our kind of equality section, we ask how suitable to your personal needs are flexible working opportunities, how confident are you that leadership team would take action to prevent discrimination if concerns were raised. Among the diversity section, we ask questions like how diverse is the staff body, how diverse is the leadership team, and to what extent does the diversity of your staff body reflect its student population or its leadership team. And then in the inclusion section, we ask how valued do you feel, how comfortable do you feel being your true self, and questions like that to get that kind of inclusivity question covered. And as a result of this, we launched this survey, I think it was January 2021, and we've been gathering data at a national scale ever since. And Hannah has been a kind of a key collaborator on this. So I'll briefly hand back to Hannah to talk about her involvement in the development of the survey, and then we can talk about the kind of report that we've got as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Iona. So when Edurio reached out, they basically were looking for some critical friendship on how they were framing their questions and their answer sets, because I think our biggest fear about collecting this data is asking the right questions and giving the right answers so that people feel included. I've received a number of national surveys from different membership groups in the last year where they've conflated sex and gender and sexual orientation, and the questions and the answers have othered people who actually have been asked to share personal details. So I think that's really important. So I know a lot of you have worked with us before on different DEI training sessions and programs, and we asked you as one of our intersessional activities to think about how are you capturing your staff survey, and that's why we always signpost to the examples of tools that are out there. If your budget lends to it, then you have got tools you can use. And I work with a number of trusts where they've got all the schools to do this report, and you get a dashboard where you can compare the data across different schools. And I know we've got people who work in a primary and secondary school who work closely together. That's quite interesting. You look at your data across the whole school, all the different parts of the school as well. So it's a brilliant tool, and they're very open to the critical friendship of getting the questions and the answers right. We then had the launch event back in, was it June 2020 or June 21? June 21, yeah. June 21. And we had a number of different speakers. And in the actual report, and I put the link into the chat, I wrote the conclusion to the report, and there's a series of questions that you as leaders can look at to interrogate the data and to think about what does this mean for us and our school and our context. So the report's worth reading, but the questions might be the kind of the next step for you to actually cascade back to your leadership team as well. Back to you, Iona.
Thanks. Yeah, just a note on the critical friendship front. I think that's a really important thing to note. And I come from a research background. I'm kind of competent at writing surveys. I'm competent at analysing data. Until I started working on this, I had no background in equality, diversity and inclusion. And Hannah has been kind of holding our hand on the kind of subject matter expertise every step of the way. And now we have a really nice collaboration where I come with some data and say, this is what the picture looks like in English schools. And Hannah says, okay, if that's what the picture looks like, this is what you need to be thinking about as a school leader. And it's in a really, really nice collaboration, and I think one that's been kind of hopefully very valuable for the sector. Do feedback if you have used our services and you think there's anything else we could be doing there. But yeah, so far it's been kind of a really nice collaboration. So yeah, so that's kind of the background of the survey itself. And now I'm going to introduce something slightly different, which is our framework for evidence-driven school improvement. So this is basically a step-by-step guide that we work with schools and trusts to across, regardless of the subject matter. So whether you're looking to improve equality, diversity and inclusion, whether you're looking to improve staff wellbeing or retention, you can take this framework and apply it in different ways, because it's about data thinking and it's about kind of gathering evidence and exploring evidence. What do I mean by evidence-informed leadership? So there's kind of an element of data within education, which is about outcomes. So what are your grades looking like? What is your attendance looking like? What are the things that are kind of easy to kind of compare from school to school or nationally, and see how are we getting on? These help you to kind of prove your performance. So you've spent 2 years investing in GCSE curriculum, and this is the outcome. We see these results and this is how we're doing. The challenge with that is that you are, by the time you've got your results, is too late. So all of the things that you've done up until that point, if you aren't kind of measuring those, you might be missing out on some really key things that you could be kind of dialing up or dialing down to kind of improve those overall outcomes. And that's what we mean by kind of collecting evidence to prove our performance. We're showing this is what we've achieved. What we're talking about here is collecting evidence to improve your performance. So looking at the things that go into these kind of longer term things, and looking at what are the things that we're doing, what are the inputs we can be doing, and yeah, looking for those kind of leading indicators of success. So if I'm getting better at this thing, maybe I'm gonna see an impact on my kind of outcomes when it comes to it. An example here would be your staff feeling included. So if your staff feel like a part of the team, are they going to be more likely to stick around for longer, be more engaged, provide perhaps a higher quality of education because they're not distracted by kind of internal struggles of fitting in and so on. Taking an evidence-informed approach is really, really valuable, and these are four examples of why. So it helps with your communication. So if you have an evidence base and you say, we know this, this and this, that's something that you can sort of say with confidence. You can say consistently, we see that this was the situation, this is what we're doing with it, and you're able to kind of effectively communicate that information because that you're all starting from the same point. And that feeds nicely into the alignment piece, is that if you're kind of seeing a challenge in this area or in that area, taking a kind of holistic look at the situation and gathering evidence to support that allows you to say, okay, this thing that we thought was a problem, it really, really is, and it does really need our attention. Or actually, we didn't realize that over here there's a big problem, and now we can kind of move on to that, which then brings into focus. So if you kind of know the situation, and taking equality, diversity and inclusion as a example, the goals I'm going to be attempting to work through as we go through this are improving equality, diversity and inclusion in your organisation. That is a huge undertaking. That is something that is not just going to happen overnight. It needs to be kind of a step-by-step thing with focused attention in different areas. By kind of taking that first step and looking at what is the situation as things stand, it allows you to kind of identify what those next steps should be. And then finally, accountability. If you have this kind of evidence base and you see this is where we are now, this is where we want to go, you can lay out those steps and you can keep yourselves accountable along the way. And those kind of first steps and that evidence base later on becomes your check-in, and you can say, we want to get better at improving equality, we want to improve equality, diversity and inclusion in our organisation. Do the survey again in a year's time, and if your results have got better, you can see your efforts are starting to take shape. Now, this is what we call our school improvement wheel. It's not quite a wheel because it's more of a spiral, but yeah, I'll take you through these next 6 steps for the rest of this session. The first 2 I'm going to rush through quite quickly because most of this will be focused on assuming you've already got data, how to then interpret it and how to kind of approach it with a kind of consistent and fair way. So as I said, we're going to set our goal, and our goal that we're going to be kind of working to achieve in the next 40 or so minutes. I don't think we're going to achieve it, but it is improving equality, diversity and inclusion within our organisation. So we've agreed that that's what we're aiming to achieve. we've set our goal, now we need to get started on doing that. And now's the time to kind of step back and say, what do we already know? So what information have we already got at our fingertips that we can start to guide us on our journey towards improving equality, diversity and inclusion within our organisation? So do we know kind of diversity data for our school versus the National School Census? Do we know kind of what our retention metrics are for people from different backgrounds? What information is already in existence in our kind of school, in our data on the internet, elsewhere? What do we already kind of think is the situation? And what are the things that we need to go and find more information to prove or disprove? And this is the point where you say, okay, what's the information that's missing? And what's the kind of overall view that I'm trying to take here? And we really recommend, if you're starting on this journey, or if you feel that you've got kind of a long way to go, then doing a kind of broad survey that's kind of consistently applied across different areas, like with ours that looks at recruitment, on the job experiences and advancement. Taking a holistic look as your first step, or one of your first steps, is really, really valuable, because, as I say, you probably think something's going on, but it's important to check that what you think is happening, and you haven't missed anything that's actually kind of really burning and is over here, but you were focusing on this thing over here. So yeah, whether or not you have kind of specific questions you want to add, that's something you can do within our survey as well. Take the overall look and then add some custom questions that you want to find out based on the evidence that you've looked at so far, and what's missing within your organisation. I'm just going to pause for a sip of water, and then we'll dig into how to explore the evidence. So, as I say, this is one of the meatier sections, and there's a few different ways of a few different things that we recommend doing when you've run your survey, you've got the data, and now you're starting to look at it. And as I say, the survey that we run is quite broad, and so it can be quite scary to straight away think, oh, actually, I don't know where to start. I want to fix everything right now, but if I try and do that, I'm sort of paralyzed. So start simple. Start kind of as zoomed out as possible. And what we have on our platform is an executive summary that shows you an average for each of the topics that we look at. So this is all dummy data. None of this is data that is kind of representative of the national picture, nor of any particular trust. But you can start with right at the very beginning and see, okay, well, our recruitment seems like that's the area where we're doing the best. We're actually still almost 20% of our staff didn't respond positively to questions about recruitment, but that's the area where we're doing the best. And then across the piece, we are seeing kind of worse scores in different areas, with diversity being one of our big challenges within the trust. So straight away you can think, okay, well, maybe I need to have a closer look at diversity, because that's both the area with the lowest scores and the area where I'm furthest away from the national picture. From there, you can, as I mentioned, kind of talking about this difference between who you are individually and then how that compares with the national picture. You can have a look at that in a bit more detail and see, actually, these are the areas where I'm doing the best, and within my trust or within my school, these topics around advancement, I'm actually doing better than the national benchmark. And when it comes to pay, I'm doing broadly in line, but a little bit better than the national benchmark. And then on the flip side, what are the areas where I'm doing the worst? So in comparison to the national benchmark. So if I have a very kind of undiverse leadership team, if the diversity of the school staff body doesn't reflect its student population, what are the things that kind of jump out to me as the big differences? And this is the point where you can start applying, I'll talk a bit more about context in a moment, but this is the point where you can start applying your own context of the situation. So perhaps you live in a kind of remote part of Cornwall, and you don't have a very diverse leadership team, but where you live is also not very diverse. It's probably unreasonable for you to beat yourself up too much about that for now. It's not, we shouldn't dismiss it, because there are things that could be done to kind of increase diversity overall. But if your regional situation, or if your school context is such that some of the things you knew you'd be behind, then that's something that you can kind of build into your initial kind of review.
Iona, can I give you a question? There's a few comments in the chat. Can you just clarify around the benchmarking, what we're benchmarking against? And there was a question around how does this compare to national data? Can you just speak to that for a second?
Sure. So so the benchmarks is basically anybody who's taken part in our survey to date. So this report that we talked about here. So when we first launched the survey, we had around 17,000 school staff, school or trust staff respond to the survey within the first few months, and that created a kind of a large benchmark of how staff members are feeling within schools and multi-academy trusts in England, and that 17,000 then became our benchmark. So anybody who's taken part in the survey can look at what their school or their trust results are, and then they can compare that against the national benchmark. So here you'd see these are your kind of overall results for your school. It's 82% positive for recruitment. That's what the people within your school or within your trust shared. So 82% of people responded positively to a question around to the questions around recruitment. But then actually the national benchmark is 84% and you're 2 below that. So it shows that you're kind of broadly in line, but just a little bit behind the overall picture. The question about how it compares to the national data is that around diversity metrics?
Yeah, just we've got, I think people just try and get their heads around the kind of the data sets that are being compared to it. So I think you've explained it around the benchmarking.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, so particularly when it comes to diversity, this is an area where this is purely how the staff perceive things. So this doesn't, so how diverse is the leadership team in your workplace? This is not in comparison to kind of school census or anything. It's the results of the survey. Okay, and then so I just talked about difference from the benchmark. Now looking at just kind of overall scores. So where have I done the best in a bit more detail? So just here we looked at this at a high level, at a kind of topic level, and then here we can look at this kind of question by question. So what was it about recruitment that was so positive? And the number one thing in this example is how comfortable candidates were made to feel during the process. But then on the flip side, the areas where the scores were the lowest is similar to the previous question around diversity. It's the previous area around diversity. And this is as I say, you've just looked at these kind of really high level results, and you've got plenty more of analysis to do. But at this point, it's good to take stock and see kind of where are we doing the best, where are we doing the least well, and you might define that differently based on your context. So actually, if you know that diversity was never going to be something that you were kind of able to achieve because of the context of your area, then perhaps you might overlook that for the next worst thing and the next kind of area of improvement. And then looking at this kind of when you have different schools or different groups within your organization, kind of starting to compare that. And one of the things that I think is really, really valuable at this point is to just trust your gut and see what was surprising. So the point of doing this kind of broad look at the situation is to see what have I missed and what is the actual situation of how my staff are feeling within my organization. And often you might find that something's surprising. One of the things that did come out in this was this perception gap between leadership and the rest of the staff body. So we found that when we asked people how committed their organisation was to promoting equality, diversity and inclusion, people in a leadership position were far more likely to say that their organisation was committed than people who aren't in a leadership position. And that's often something that sort of might be a sort of surprise and sort of something, a moment to take stock, and then a moment to say, actually, I need to look into this in more detail and understand where it is that there's this mismatch in perception. And And then, yeah, so now we've done that first look, and we've started to dig into it. Now we can go in and get into a lot more context. So within our platform, we have the ability to compare schools within the trust. So if you're in a multi-academy trust and you've got 3 schools, you can sort of take a very quick look and see, as a sort of heat map, where are the areas where one school is doing particularly well, and another is doing a little bit less well. And that allows you to sort of share knowledge within your organisation and help to kind of share best practice and guide people in the right direction. If we know that something's happening really sort of well in this area, let's chat over here. You could use this in a different way, and at the moment I'm showing you primary schools across the top. You could actually split this and do different protected characteristics. So you could look at the difference in questions between people from different groups. And that's also something that we can do at the kind of question by question level, see a real breakdown of who was kind of answering very positively, quite positively, less so, and down to kind of not at all. And in this question, we ask, how confident are you that all staff are treated equally in your workplace? And we can see that disabled staff were much less confident than non-disabled staff, that all staff were treated equally. And this speaks to the perception gap that I just mentioned as well, around senior leadership being the most positive, and then other members of staff being not quite seeing the situation in the same way. And then now is where I'll talk about the benchmark, although I'll speak more quickly about this one than I would do, because we've already covered that. But yeah, so the benchmark is how you kind of compare yourself to the national picture. So in our platform, we have these purple lines, and that basically shows you for each question or for each group, how far ahead or behind am I? So what you want to see is that the green bars, you're far ahead of the purple bar, and for the orange and red ones, you're behind. But this gives you a really good sense, just at a sort of first glance, how am I doing in comparison to a comparable group? So at the moment, our benchmarks are national, and then secondary and primary. But what we can do with our team of data experts is we can do kind of more in-depth analysis and provide, if you're a trust of special schools, or if you're a girls' school, or if there's something kind of unique about your organisation where we have other comparable groups, we can drill down further and do kind of bespoke analysis that helps you to compare against a more a smaller benchmark, but a perhaps a more comparable one. And then the other thing to do, and you'll see collaboration coming in and in a couple of more points in this presentation, but the other thing to do is to talk to colleagues about this. So you have probably gone into this with an idea about what you're going to see, and as I mentioned, it's really important to look out for surprises, but also you might well be kind of victim of confirmation bias and looking for the data that supports your point of view. And so bringing somebody else into that discussion is really, really valuable, because they'll have their biases and they'll be better at spotting your biases than you are. So having a good chat about those things that surprised you, those things that you think are strengths or weaknesses, what's in there, how the data kind of shows that, and what examples you can see kind of offline. So what examples from the classroom or from the staff room do you see that kind of show you this data kind of coming to life? And this is more for kind of school groups. And I know we've got people from different kind of school systems on this, but if you could replace trust with school group, or with kind of international school, or with kind of there's other ways of looking at this, local authority, but taking school trust as an example, if you're kind of managing this centrally, if you're the kind of equality, diversity and inclusion lead for your organisation, it's important that you are both kind of setting the vision and setting the kind of parameters for it, so that you can have that consistency, and you can do the kind of comparison between schools and share resources between and best practices between, but it's really important to have the schools on board as well, because ultimately that's where the change is going to happen, and where the change is going to be felt. So having kind of school heads or school-based EDI leads or anything like that, having buy-in from the team across the organisation is really, really important. So yeah, that's a kind of whistle-stop tour around exploring the evidence and understanding kind of what you've actually got, and then from there it's time to sit back and say, okay, so what can we conclude from this? And I think that this is where we go back to kind of comparing sources. So I mentioned at the beginning this kind of gather evidence stage, and the importance of sort of seeing what other information you already have and what you already know. And it's time to do that again now. So now you've added this extra piece of the puzzle, you've done this big survey, you've done this kind of holistic, a kind of across the board look at the staff experience. What other information do you have, and how does that compare to the other evidence that you've already gathered? So thinking about kind of teacher observations, or thinking about kind of anything that teachers have shared with you kind of just in a chat, or just kind of more qualitatively. Attendance, is there anything, or here would be kind of retention or kind of staff absence and so on. Is there any kind of data that you can put in there that might compare it to if a particular group has kind of stood out as having a more negative experience within your organisation? How does that compare to their absences or their retention or their kind of comments? And then what other surveys and what other data have you got? So you might have diversity data on your staff, you have the school census and so on. How can you compare what you've got from our survey with your kind of what you're seeing with your own two eyes and what you're seeing elsewhere? And then finally, these two kind of merge into one another. You've taken a look and you've said, okay, well, this is what the picture looks like. We've explored the evidence. We've got an understanding of what we're looking at here, what we're going to do about it. And we kind of say a few things is really, really important. And the first one is communicating. So one of the easiest ways to get people to not take part in the next survey is for them to see no benefit whatsoever of doing the survey the first time round. And so if you have taken people's time and they've spent sort of half an hour giving you this really interesting information, first thing to do is to acknowledge that has happened. So start by saying thank you. And even more impactfully, explain kind of what you learned. So you've just drawn your conclusions. Now I'm going to summarize that. So we learned from in the survey, you told us that we are doing a good job of this. We're doing a good job of this. There's more to be done here. And what's really, really impactful is beyond the kind of summary, beyond the kind of this is what we learned, saying this is what we're going to do. So we talk about kind of you said we did, and this is something that a number of trusts that we work with have made real use of. They sort of say this is something that we learned in the survey, this is what we're going to do, or this is what we did as a result. And often, as I say, you want to be communicating as soon as possible. So saying we're going to do this thing is impactful as well. You don't need to wait until you've already set up the working group, or you've already kind of hit the milestone on the thing that you're planning on improving. The fact that you're embarking on a journey to improve that area is something that's worth sharing as soon as possible. And celebrating success. So here I'm going to celebrate the success of one of our customers, Pathfinder Schools. So this is something that they put together off the back of one of our surveys, and they basically did kind of this summary of success, summary of areas of improvement, and explained what they're going to do about it. So they shared some of the feedback that came from their staff. So the kind of verbatim responses: we're a team, I feel very looked after and cared for, just as I care for them. And they also kind of summarized specifics on areas that came out as strengths for the organization, and they shared areas where they felt there was room for development. So they weren't shying away from anything that they learned that they need to be doing better. They were confidently sharing that back with their team and with their kind of staff. This is something that you've told us we need to work on. We're going to work on it, and this is how we're going to do it. These are our next steps. And that's been really well received, and helps to kind of encourage your team that this is something that you're taking seriously and that you want to partner with them on this journey of improvement. And as I said before, I'm repeating this slide because I think it comes in really to the fore here. So particularly if this has been something, this analysis and this kind of evidence-based gathering exercise has been done centrally, or if it's been done at a school level, but only at the senior leadership level, it's really, really important to bring others on the journey. So once you've kind of shared these things, or even before that, whilst we're doing the analysis, getting more people in the room, getting people kind of on board with this as a journey rather than as a kind of one and done, taken your information, I've ticked the box of doing kind of staff feedback, and now I'm too busy with other things to do anything with it. The more people that are involved simultaneously, the more they'll know that this matters, and then the more that they'll see that their time spent initially was worthwhile, but also the more likely to have impact it is, because people can give you quick feedback on this is going to work within my school, this is not going to work because, and you can work to kind of tweak the kind of approach based on the individual context of the school itself. I don't know why I put this slide here. Oh, so this is my previous point about collaborating, and this is, yeah, if you can see within one of your schools you've got kind of really high scores. So this one, you can see that South Central Academy is doing particularly well. Perhaps you want to put them in touch with North Sea Primary, who's doing a little bit less well in that area, and you can start to kind of share ideas and share best practices between kind of who's got the capacity to give and who needs to take at that point. And finally, so yeah, I've mentioned kind of the first thing to do is communicate. The next thing to do is kind of, yeah, say what are your plans, and this can be kind of split into two buckets: what you're going to do right now and what you're going to do next. And I would put saying thank you within the quick wins, but there's also going to be other things that you can do to kind of make sure that you're having immediate impact from the survey and from what you've learned as part of this kind of evidence gathering exercise. But there's also going to be things that you can't fix in a week, or you can't fix even in a year, but if you don't start today, then that will just keep going. So splitting those things out and actually making that part of your communication plan is, we expect these things to be taken care of by Christmas. We're going to start working on these things because they're big and they need further kind of investigating and further kind of analysis, and we need to go further with this. And then the last stage of the kind of school improvement wheel is to review and continue. So you see here, the wheel just sort of keeps on going forever. And once you've got to this point, this survey now actually fits within your kind of gather evidence stage. You're back at kind of back to the beginning. You can set your goals for moving this forward from a place of kind of knowledge, and you can come back and repeat the same survey in a year's time, and you can see kind of what's changed. What are the things that are surprising me now? Has the things that I've been working on over the course of this year had the impact that I'm hoping, and that will be seen in the form of, are my scores getting better, or in some cases, have I spent too much time focusing over here, and now this thing that I didn't think was a problem has started to become one. So making sure that you're consistently kind of bringing evidence into the policy, into the kind of your strategy and your processes, to make sure that you're on track and to course correct where you need to. And as I say, this kind of initial review, now you've done this kind of first look, and you can see these are the areas of strength, and these are the difference from the benchmark. You can say, I'm going to focus on a couple of things over the course of the next year, and then you can come back in a year's time and see how am I doing since that first go. So safety was my best area. Now I've got a little bit worse, but it wasn't really a focus because I was already doing okay, and I'm comfortable with that being kind of there. Meanwhile, I can see actually that this area has got quite a lot worse, so I need to give that more attention going forwards. And one of the other key benefits of kind of bringing this into the kind of core of your surveying. So this is from a staff, one of our staff experience surveys rather than equality, diversity and inclusion. But these are the response rates that we saw year after year for one of our large trust partners who's been doing this survey with us for 4 years. And in the first year, they had 4 in 10 staff members filling out the survey, but they invested in doing these kind of saying thank you, telling them what they've learned, telling them what they're going to do about it. Staff were able to see that their feedback was having an impact, and they came back next year and more of them responded to the survey. And then this year, following a slight dip during a heavily disrupted COVID lockdown, this year we had almost all staff within the organisation taking part in the survey, and that's not purely because they surveyed every year, but the fact that they surveyed every year was one of the many things they were doing to tell staff that we care about this and this is something that we're looking to improve. And yeah, that kind of summarizes, that's kind of the end of my journey through evidence-informed school improvement. So I've got a couple of things I just want to say at the end. So I stole this, this is not an Edurio piece of thinking. I actually stole this from a webinar I was in the other day, and I thought I want to say this. I want to say this in the webinar that I'm doing on Friday. This is about evidence-informed leadership. They were quite kind of pushy on the need to put data first. I think that data is actually part of the picture and you need to include it, but you need to be able to kind of apply that context and all of the things we've talked about today. But they said 3 things. They said we make decisions based on data first. We make decisions based on data even when the data tells us something we don't want to hear. And we make decisions based on data even when the data contradicts our instincts. And I think those last 2 things are really, really important, because if you haven't done this kind of overview, sort of holistic look at the situation, you might be missing something, and actually perhaps you are in a leadership position and you're being told and you're seeing within your survey that you and your kind of peers within the SLT thought the situation was great. Actually, the staff that are coming into your organisation each day, their experience is slightly different, and so it's time to kind of sit up and listen. So yeah, that's kind of the end. I've linked at the bottom, but I can drop a line in the chat. This is a link to our equality, diversity and inclusion survey. If anybody is kind of interested in talking to me about kind of taking part in it and getting access to these national data sets, I'll share that in the chat. And also this is a link to our other insights. So I've talked you through the one in the top left, our equality, diversity and inclusion, and the evidence-driven school improvement one has been the key thing that's driven this discussion today. But we have plenty of other resources from our other surveys and some of our other ways of thinking on this point here in edurio.com/insights. And that is the end of the presentation. I'll stop sharing and I'll come back to
brilliant. Thank you, Iona. Take some water. I know you've been talking non-stop there for about 45 minutes. I'm just going to go to the questions that are in the chat and then I'll throw it out to the room. So I'm going to go bottom up because it's the first one I can see. How many questions are in the EDI survey? I can't remember the answer to this.
Neither can I. I want to say it's in the 50s.
Yeah, somewhere in the 50s. And what was the average survey return? You kind of talked about that. Like, it's great to be able to track that across a trust, but what was the average like return rate like on the EDI report for some of the schools and trusts you're working with?
I actually don't have that. What I think I can pull is the number of we had 17,000 in the first go, and I believe that was from 200 schools. So that doesn't answer the question, but it gives data
kind of fair. And the follow-up question, I don't mind answering this one: how do you promote good return rates? I think it's a really good question, CJ. I only gave some thoughts there, but going back to one of the trusts I'm working with, where they've asked all the staff across the whole trust to do the survey, and going back to Haroop's question about do we need to raise awareness and consciousness before we actually send out the survey? Because some schools send out a survey and ask questions that staff don't understand, and then the data's not right. with this trust, we did a whole trust day conference. There's a number of different speakers, and at the end of the conference, it was what we're going to do next. And one of the things is we're going to ask you all to fill in this survey, and this is why we're asking you to do the survey, and this is how the data is going to be used. And that buy-in was there because we'd done a journey of the day of understanding consciousness, and that confidence in how the data wasn't going to be used against them was really, really important. So they got a higher return rate because of the framing. So thinking about how we position this, I also think when you send it out is really, really key. We used to do the workload and wellbeing one twice a year. If I sent it out today on the Friday before half term, you can imagine the kind of response it would get about staff workload and wellbeing. So thinking about when you time it to get the best responses, the best frequency and quality, I think is really key as well. There's a question from, we've got Joe and Sarah in Bahrain here, Iona, and the question was, they need to be really mindful and culturally sensitive to the context in which they are doing this work. Do you work with schools to ensure that the questions of the surveys can be tailored to different contexts when perhaps some of those identities are actually illegal within that context?
Yes, so yeah, each of our surveys are customizable. What we do is you can remove questions as many as you like. We have a recommended minimum number of questions so that you get kind of good value for money in actually taking the survey, but you can remove questions. So taking out a question around sexual orientation, you wouldn't be able to analyze by that, of course, but also that would be kind of not covered within the survey. What we do if you are changing any of the kind of details of the question, so if we had a question that said kind of in the last 6 months and you wanted to change it to in the last month, you would lose the benchmark because you're not comparing apples for apples. Or if you wanted to compare the leadership team and you wanted to change that to say trust CEO, not comparing apples to apples. So you can ask that question, but you can't have a comparison with the national benchmark.
Brilliant. And the final question from Marlon, you've addressed some of this, but I just want to tease it a little bit further around the reliability around some of the sample sizes for the benchmarking. Tell me if I've got this wrong. I think I remember from the data that we didn't have a big enough data set for gender identity or pregnancy and maternity at that point in survey 1, so we couldn't then report on the national data trend. Have I remembered that right?
100%, yeah. So yeah, we are capturing this data, but we are not reporting on it if we haven't got a large enough group. And at this kind of individual school or trust level, if you're accessing our services, we have an anonymity filter within our platform. So if you filter down to a group that has 3 or less people in it, you can't actually see those results because we don't want you to be able to filter by sort of 3 particular characteristics that only one member of your staff kind of is within that group. So we anything that would reveal people's identity, we cap at least 3 people, and at the national level it's much higher.
Brilliant. And re-benchmarking, we've obviously got international schools here, and this comes from Marlon and colleagues over in Canada. So if they did this survey, would they be being benchmarked against UK schools?
Yes. So for the time being, what we would do. So what we tend to do is if we have an imperfect benchmark, we say we can give this to you with the caveat that your context is different. So because what we want to be able to do is in time we want enough Canadian schools, or we want enough.
Here's a plug for if Martin Marlon can get 50 Canadian schools to sign up, you've then got benchmarking data. I'll do that plug for you.
Thank you kindly.
The other question was around comparison across different sectors. Was it 200 state schools? Is there a comparison between the independent sector and the state sector?
Our main customer base is multi-academy trusts. So our main respondent base is state schools. It's very much the vast majority. So same thing applies to the kind of Canada question. You'll be in a slightly different context, but we're happy to give you those benchmarks with that caveat. But also, please do tell your friends in other parts of your sector.
Challenge heard. Marlon's got to be on commission for you over there. We've got a few minutes left. Is there anyone who wants to unmute and share any thoughts or ask any further questions whilst we have Iona with us?
Yeah, Hannah.
Go on, Joe, go for it.
I was just wondering, sometimes I would have thought issues that arise are going to be quite straightforward and there'll be obvious solutions, but maybe sometimes there won't be. And I was just wondering, do you work with schools post-survey to offer advice on how to tackle some concerns that may have arisen in the surveys, that the solution might not be that straightforward?
So what I would do as Edurio is I would say, oh, let me put you in touch with Hannah Wilson, who is kind of better placed to help with these things. And yeah, then we would kind of, we as Edurio don't make recommendations about areas where we're not subject matter experts, but we have this network, and with our safeguarding survey, it's the same. We work with kind of safeguarding experts to put trust in touch with.
Yeah, thank you, Iona. And Joe, you obviously know Angie. So Angie and I did the keynote at the event. So quite often it comes to both of us, and then we decide who's better placed to support as well. Because it, like you say, quite often it's very live and very real challenges, and it's quite often deeply seated within the culture, and it's a longer term transformation that we need to look at. And we're obviously more holistic in how we work. We would also then refer on, if it was a piece around pregnancy, maternity, would say, hey, do you know Lindsay and Lucy at Flexible Teacher Talent? Do you know Emma at Maternity CPD? And we signpost out to the specialists within the particular protected characteristics as well.
That's great, thank you.
Any other questions in the room? No one's asked the question that I always ask, like, how much does it cost? It's not free. Don't be shy, people. Come on, what budgets?
Yeah, so good question, and the answer is it depends. So we have different kind of tiers. So if you are an individual school, you'll have a slightly different setup because you won't have that kind of trust structure. So the costing basically depends on how many pupils sit within your organisation, and so the bigger the trust, the per pupil cost comes down, or the per school cost might come down, but actually it does depend on kind of and how bespoke you're looking to make this, because we can do a kind of off the shelf, take the survey, give you a link, send that out, no kind of input really needed,
no interaction. Yeah,
but then and you will have a dedicated customer success manager to help through the kind of the process anyway. But if it's kind of a bit meatier and we're doing lots of adaptations and you want to import data about your staff, then the cost is a bit higher as well. So yeah.
Let me just probe further, because we know that your clients are mainly academies and trusts in the UK sector. What about maintained schools who are localities? Could a locality have a dashboard?
Yes. So yes, we've done stuff where so there's an organisation called Hearts for Learning that we've been talking to, and about the idea of getting basically a collaboration between schools in Hertfordshire. And what you would do there is, provided we have opt-in from all of the schools, somebody can manage it kind of centrally and see that kind of overall data, and we can present a kind of overall benchmark for that group.
Yeah, brilliant. So you're benchmarking against local and regional data. And just final question, thinking about the international schools, a lot of international schools belong to different membership groups. Could like a membership group potentially have a dashboard across a group of international schools?
Yeah, same situation if everyone's kind of bought into it. And what we can do as well is limit the access. So if you're a school leader, you could be in a situation where you see your results only and the kind of summary results, so you versus the benchmark for your group, but that you can also have a kind of a centrally organized person who can see each individual school.
Brilliant, that's great. I've dominated the questions there, but I just wanted to tease a few things out. What are there any other final questions before we close today's session? Anything else you want to blurt out?
In the meantime, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Please do reach out if you want to discuss anything. I'd be very, very happy to chat. I know we've got some of our customers on the line as well. So if there's anything I've said that you kind of want to dig into a bit more detail in your results, do shout and I can discuss. But yeah, that's my email address. I think Hannah's already shared this, but share
the report, and Iona can send me a blurb and some links, and when I send out the recording, I'll send out the blurb, the links and the recording, and how you can access the report. I definitely think sharing the recording with colleagues but also the report with colleagues would would be the conversation starter. And I've just popped the dates back up on for the next session. So post half term over here in the UK on Monday, 7th November, we've got our second partner building on this, the GEC, and then a few weeks later we've got Flare Impact as well. So if you're coming to all 3 sessions, you can begin to compare the different tools and then think about which one is best placed, best positioned really for you in your context. But a massive thank you to Iona for a very comprehensive and detailed presentation. I'm an English teacher, data was never my forte, but I feel like you've really helped break some of that down. And thank you to everyone for making the time to join us this afternoon. I appreciate how busy you all are and how knackered you are as we head into half term. Have a good break, and we'll hopefully see you at the next session in a few weeks' time.